Chapter 1. The Encounter. Ethan had always considered himself a man who appreciated simplicity. The steady hum of life on Earth was more than enough for him. He was one of those rare individuals who found joy in the quiet moments, like sipping on his coffee during a peaceful morning, or watching the sunset as the sky slowly faded into the evening glow, with no rush to be anywhere or do anything. His life, however, was anything but simple. As a freelance translator for intergalactic missions, Ethan had found himself deep in the heart of galactic diplomacy, which brought him far from the comfort of Earth's quiet life. It had been years since he'd first accepted the job, and what had started as an interest in ancient languages and cultures had evolved into a career that involved meeting alien species, interpreting complex negotiations, and handling diplomatic issues that sometimes felt too strange to understand. The money was good, the travel was better, but he had long since grown tired of the never-ending politics and backroom deals that came with the job. He wasn't in it for the excitement anymore. He was in it for the paycheck and the perks: luxurious accommodations, exotic planets, and a life that, while not entirely fulfilling, provided him with the kind of lifestyle most people could only dream of. But deep down, Ethan longed for something more, something that didn't revolve around negotiations, trading advanced technology, or sitting in a cold, sterile conference room surrounded by alien diplomats. He had never thought that it would come to him in the way it did. It started as just another routine assignment. He had been summoned to Sarvax 4, a bustling planet located in the Nebulan Expanse. Sarvax 4 was known for being a hotbed of political intrigue, a hub for galactic trade, and a place where the wealthiest and most powerful factions gathered to broker deals and broker power. As far as Ethan was concerned, it was just another job in a long string of assignments. The planet's expansive cityscape was dominated by sleek skyscrapers and towering structures, a modern juxtaposition to the labyrinthine alleyways and older districts that had been here for centuries, serving as homes to thousands of different species. The high-rise buildings that reached for the sky reflected the neon lights of the streets, making Sarvax for a city of contrast, an area where the future and the past collided in the most visually striking way. To the outsider, it might have seemed like a utopia of prosperity, but to those who lived here, it was a cutthroat world of power struggles, where every person seemed to be trying to climb one rung higher on the social ladder. Ethan had seen it all. Sarvax 4 was the kind of place where people made deals with their hearts and souls, often at the cost of their integrity. But for Ethan, it was just another part of the galaxy that needed translating, and he wasn't particularly interested in the drama of the place. All he cared about was the negotiation, the facts, and the contracts. The invitation for the diplomatic summit was straightforward enough. His job was to serve as the translator between a group of alien species, some of whom had long-standing rivalries, and a team of humans trying to finalize a trade agreement. Nothing out of the ordinary, just another mission. At least, that's what he thought. The moment Ethan stepped off the transport shuttle and onto the landing pad, however, he felt an odd sensation deep in his gut. The air smelled different, strange, like a mix of exotic spices and ozone. The bustling city, with its overwhelming noise and activity, felt a little too intense, and as he walked through the streets to the meeting hall, something about the place seemed more oppressive than it had ever been before. Maybe it was the strange feeling in the air, the unspoken tension between the different alien factions, or the way people seemed to whisper in hushed tones as he passed them. As he approached the building where the summit was being held, Ethan couldn't shake the nagging feeling in his chest. He didn't know what it was. Was it nerves? Or was it something deeper, something he couldn't quite put into words? He brushed it off, chalking it up to the pressure of the mission. As a translator, his role was important, but ultimately secondary to the decisions being made by the diplomats. He was there to help them communicate, nothing more. The room where the summit took place was large, dimly lit by the soft, warm light of bioluminescent panels embedded in the walls. It had a sense of grandeur to it, a certain elegance that contrasted with the city outside, where everything seemed fast-paced and aggressive. Ethan took his seat in the corner, positioned behind a translator's booth where he could hear the exchange of ideas but remain invisible, just a facilitator of communication. As the different factions and species entered the room, he couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. There were beings from all over the galaxy, tall, short, insectoid, humanoid, and everything in between. Some wore armor, others were adorned with ceremonial robes, and the sheer diversity of life forms in the room made Ethan feel like a speck in a vast, unknowable universe. But then, everything shifted when she entered. The door to the chamber slid open with a soft hiss, and in stepped a woman. No, not just a woman, but a being unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. She was tall, almost unnaturally so, her posture regal and commanding. She moved with the fluid grace of someone accustomed to power, yet there was something ethereal about her, something that left an undeniable impression the moment she stepped into the room. Her skin was a shimmering, deep shade of violet, as if the stars themselves had painted her in shades of the cosmos. Her eyes were unlike anything he had ever encountered, glowing faintly with an inner light, the color shifting like liquid metal as she scanned the room. Her features were sharp, high cheekbones, a straight nose, and full lips, but it was the way she carried herself that left Ethan breathless. It wasn't just her beauty, it was her presence, her undeniable strength, and the quiet authority that radiated from her every movement. She was an alien, yes, but she seemed so much more. She seemed like she belonged to something ancient, something that had stood the test of time and civilization. As she walked into the room, every eye in the chamber turned toward her. Even the seasoned diplomats who had seen hundreds of different species and individuals stared in awe. There was something about her that captivated them all. Ethan couldn't help but be drawn in. She was stunning. Beautiful, yes, but there was something deeper in her that made her stand apart from everyone else. It wasn't just physical, it was as if she embodied the power of the universe itself. She took her seat at the table, and when she glanced in Ethan's direction, their eyes met for a brief moment. It was like a jolt of electricity shot through him, a connection he couldn't explain. His mouth went dry, and for a split second, he forgot the reason he was there. The room seemed to fade into the background. The summit began, but Ethan's attention was divided. He was there to translate, yes, but his eyes kept drifting back to the alien woman. His mind kept circling back to her, to the inexplicable pull he felt. At one point, as the discussions between the representatives grew more intense, she looked directly at him again. This time, Ethan couldn't stop himself. He smiled, his face betraying the genuine admiration he felt for her, her poise, her elegance, the quiet strength she exuded. Without thinking, he whispered to himself, "She's beautiful." The words were out before he could stop them. It was a simple observation, nothing more, and yet the moment they left his lips, something incredible happened. The air in the room seemed to shift, as though the very atmosphere had thickened. The alien woman's eyes locked on his again, this time with an intensity that left him breathless. For a moment, it felt as though time had stopped. Her gaze was unblinking, deep and unreadable, and then, without breaking eye contact, she spoke, her voice soft, almost melodic, but with an undeniable power that shook him. "You have called me beautiful," she said, her words cutting through the tension of the room like a blade. "And by the ancient customs of my people, that means more than you realize." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. He could only stare at her in disbelief. What did she mean? What did that mean for him? The woman's lips curled into a faint smile, a smile that was not entirely kind, but not cruel either. It was a smile of acknowledgement, a smile that held something powerful, something ancient, and something he could not begin to understand. And then, the ground beneath him shifted. What had seemed like a fleeting moment, a simple compliment, was about to change everything for Ethan. The world he had known, the life he had built, and the future he had envisioned were now completely irrelevant. What happened next was beyond anything he could have imagined, and the consequences of that one simple compliment would leave him reeling. Ethan's heart raced, and his mind spun in circles as he tried to process what had just happened. He had called her beautiful. That was it. A simple compliment, a passing observation, and yet the moment he had uttered those words, the room itself seemed to change. The other delegates and diplomats went about their conversations, oblivious to the strange tension that had enveloped him and the alien woman. But Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that everything in the universe had just shifted. The woman's gaze didn't waver. Her eyes, still glowing faintly with that otherworldly light, seemed to penetrate through him. She tilted her head slightly, almost as if studying him, as if deciding whether to let the moment pass or to say something more. The silence between them stretched longer than was comfortable. Ethan felt his palms grow clammy, and he wiped them against his pants nervously, feeling the weight of the situation far more than any negotiation he had ever been a part of. What had he done? Finally, she spoke again, her voice cutting through the air like a blade, sharp and deliberate. You called me beautiful, human. That is no trivial thing in my culture. It means that you've acknowledged something far deeper than just my appearance. The words felt heavy, laden with meaning that Ethan couldn't grasp. I didn't mean anything by it, he stammered, now feeling the heat rise to his face as he realized how absurd the whole thing sounded. Well, you are? I meant it as a compliment. It's just how I feel. Her expression didn't change. It remained serene, inscrutable, but there was something else beneath her calm exterior, something calculating, something that made Ethan feel as though he was standing on the precipice of a reality he couldn't control. What you fail to understand, human, is that in my world, beauty is not something superficial, she said, her voice low but commanding. It is a sign of power, of worth. In my species, to be called beautiful by someone is to be bound to them by an ancient law. Ethan blinked, trying to grasp the significance of her words. Bound by law? He repeated, bewildered. But I didn't know. How could I know? She finally broke eye contact, turning slightly away as if deep in thought. Her eyes softened just a fraction, but the underlying weight of her presence still held Ethan captive. She took a deep breath and seemed to consider the full meaning of what she had just revealed. Indeed, she said after a moment, you didn't know? But the law is ancient, older than the stars themselves. It is not something that can be dismissed. By acknowledging me as beautiful, you have unknowingly invoked it. Now, by tradition, you are bound to me, and I to you. You are mine. The air in the room seemed to thicken as her words sank into Ethan's mind. Bound to her? He hadn't meant anything of the sort. He hadn't even thought about the consequences when he had complimented her. All he had seen was a striking woman, a being so impossibly captivating that it had felt like the most natural thing in the world to say it. He never imagined it could have such an overwhelming consequence. As the realization began to settle in, a nervous laugh escaped him, though it came out more strained than he intended. Wait, you can't be serious. You're saying that just because I called you beautiful dash. She interrupted him, her voice firm and unyielding. It is not a mere matter of words. In the eyes of my people, it is an unbreakable bond. You called me beautiful, and that is a declaration, one that binds us in ways far beyond your understanding. Ethan's head was spinning. He had heard stories of strange customs and alien laws that govern different species, but this was something else entirely. He was no expert in alien cultures, let alone one that seemed to follow a set of rules so completely different from anything on Earth. What does this mean for me? He asked, his voice a little more strained now. His eyes flicked nervously between her and the others in the room. What exactly are you saying? That I'm bound to you? By some ancient law? She nodded, her face as unreadable as ever. Yes, you are bound to me now. This means that, by tradition, you must accompany me, aid me, and offer your loyalty and protection. You will be my partner in all things. Ethan swallowed hard, feeling his throat tighten. His life had just been upended by a single comment. The reality of the situation was dawning on him now, and with it came a growing sense of panic. This was no small matter, no simple misunderstanding. The weight of her words hit him all at once. Partner in all things? Protection? Loyalty? What happens if I refuse? He asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. The warrior's gaze didn't shift, but there was an unmistakable edge in her voice when she spoke next. Refusal is not an option, human. The law is binding, and to break it would bring consequences not only to you, but to your entire species. It is a fate that no one can undo once invoked. The implications of her words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Ethan felt as though he were drowning in this strange reality, a reality that had spiraled out of control the moment he had uttered that one simple sentence. His mind raced with questions about the alien culture, the ancient law, and his own future. The idea of being bound to this powerful, enigmatic woman was terrifying. How was he supposed to navigate a life intertwined with someone like her? Before he could formulate another question, the translator's device clicked on, signaling the end of the session. The voices of the other delegates filled the room again, and the sterile hum of the technology brought some semblance of normalcy back. But to Ethan, everything had changed. The political discussions continued around him, but he could barely focus. His entire world felt like it had been turned upside down. The alien woman had made it clear his life, from this moment forward, was no longer his own. "Stay," she said quietly, her voice soft yet commanding. "We have much to discuss. The pact between us cannot be ignored." Chapter 2. The Binding. The following days were a blur for Ethan. His mind couldn't seem to catch up with what had just happened, and every time he tried to focus on his work, the memory of the alien woman's words, the declaration of being bound to her, pulled him into a vortex of confusion and fear. How was he supposed to navigate this? He was a translator, an expert in language, not an expert in galactic laws or interspecies relationships. He had been thrust into a role that he had never asked for, a role that seemed more like a trap than an opportunity. Zara, the alien woman, beautiful, imposing, and enigmatic, was a constant presence now, and her every move seemed to carry an undeniable weight. She was everywhere, her eyes always on him, her words echoing in his head. At the same time, though, there was an undeniable force that pulled him toward her. He couldn't explain it, but it was as though his very being was responding to her, to the bond that had been created in an instant, one that neither of them could undo. Ethan had tried to distance himself from her after the initial shock of the encounter, but she made it clear that wasn't an option. She was relentless in her pursuit of this partnership. He was expected to accompany her everywhere, to assist in her tasks, and most importantly, to learn and understand the ancient laws that governed their strange, inexplicable bond. The deeper he ventured into her world, the more he began to understand the weight of his actions, and the deeper the connection between them grew. The law that had bound them together wasn't just some metaphor or tradition, it was a living, breathing part of their fates. It would be difficult to escape, and even more difficult to break. It was part of their universe now. But what Ethan hadn't realized was that as the bond between them grew stronger, so too did the stakes. The future of the galaxy, the ancient conflicts, and the enemies that Zara had spent years evading were all coming for them. And Ethan would soon learn that the bond he had unwittingly created would not only change his life, it would change the galaxy itself. The following days on Sarvax 4 passed in a blur for Ethan. At first, he tried to push the strange bond that had been forged between him and Zara to the back of his mind, but it was impossible. No matter how hard he tried to focus on the diplomatic talks or the translations he was hired for, the weight of her presence followed him like a shadow. She was always nearby, her gaze steady, assessing, calculating. She never pushed him, but her presence was constant, like an undeniable force of nature that could not be ignored. Zara, despite her stoic nature, was careful to make sure Ethan understood his new role. Every time they met, she would calmly reiterate the ancient law that now bound them together. "You are mine, human," she would say, her voice low, her words carrying a weight that was both unsettling and intoxicating. "In the eyes of my people, there is no escape from this bond. It is more than just a law, it is the foundation of everything we are. And you are now part of that foundation." Each time she spoke of their bond, Ethan's sense of disbelief deepened. He had never asked for this, never sought out a life in the galaxy's turbulent political arena. All he had wanted was the quiet peace of his work, his home, his life. But now, fate had thrown him into the very heart of intergalactic diplomacy and ancient traditions that he didn't even begin to understand. Zara's presence was both intimidating and captivating. She didn't just walk into a room, she commanded it. Her mere existence seemed to fill the space with a kind of energy that made everyone take notice. And yet, when her eyes were on him, Ethan couldn't help but feel small, like a piece of a much larger puzzle he had no hope of completing. He had caught a glimpse of the world she came from, but even that fleeting glimpse was more than he could ever hope to fully grasp. As the days went by, Ethan found himself learning more than he had anticipated. Zara would take him to meetings, sometimes pulling him aside in the middle of tense negotiations to explain the nuances of her people's culture, their laws, and their customs. He began to understand the Zuri. Her people were a fierce, proud species who held power in high regard. They valued strength, honor, and loyalty above all else. To be called beautiful, to be acknowledged in such a way, was no small matter. It was a declaration, a statement that could change everything. The deeper he delved into her world, the more his own life seemed to slip away, replaced by a new reality that had been forced upon him. And then, one evening, the truth of their bond became undeniable. Ethan had spent the day working through the political contracts, translating the legal documents for an upcoming trade agreement. He was exhausted, and when the sun dipped below the horizon, he retreated to his quarters, hoping for some peace. But peace was not something he could find easily now. There was a soft knock at his door. Before he could even answer, the door slid open, and Zara entered, her tall, imposing figure standing in the doorway. She was dressed in ceremonial robes, her armor beneath the flowing fabric catching the light. Her gaze met his, and for a moment, the world outside seemed to fade. "I need you," she said simply, her voice steady, but her tone carrying the weight of command. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. There was a certain finality in her words, something that left no room for argument. "Need me?" he repeated, unsure of where this was going. "I cannot do this alone," Zara said, stepping closer. "This bond between us, whether you like it or not, is not just about protection. It is about strength. You are my partner now, and together, we will face what is to come. You must stand by my side." Her words struck him harder than he expected. The weight of her statement was not lost on him. They weren't just allies. They weren't just two individuals working together. This was something more. This was something permanent. Ethan began, but the words failed him. He had no response to what she was asking, no way to articulate the swirl of emotions running through him. He had no idea what it meant to stand by her side, no clue what kind of future awaited them. "You must learn to trust in this bond," she continued, her voice softening slightly, though the power behind her words never wavered. "You cannot face this galaxy alone, and neither can I." The room felt smaller now, as if the weight of her words had collapsed the space around them. Ethan opened his mouth again, but the words didn't come. He didn't know what to say. How could he possibly understand the enormity of what she was asking? How could he be her equal, her partner, when he felt so out of his depth? Zara's gaze never left his. "You have no choice, Ethan. The law is already in motion. You are mine, and I am yours. We will fight together. That is the only way forward." With that, she turned and walked out, her presence lingering like a storm that had already passed through the room, leaving nothing behind but a stillness that made the air feel charged with something more than just tension. Chapter 3: The Price of Loyalty. The days that followed Zara's visit were a blur of activity and growing tension. The bond between them was no longer just a legal concept, it was something that defined every aspect of their lives. Every step Ethan took now felt like it was part of a larger, unknowable dance, one that was being led by forces far beyond his control. He had been pulled into a world of political maneuvering, of ancient traditions, of galactic empires, and of laws that bound him to someone he barely understood. Zara was always there, whether in the background or by his side, her presence as constant as the stars themselves. She had made it clear that there was no turning back, that their futures were now linked. She was not just the warrior queen of a fallen empire. She was his equal in the ancient law that had bound them. And though she had not yet fully explained what that meant, Ethan could feel the weight of it every time he was near her. The negotiations for the trade agreement had become more intense, more dangerous. There were factions in the galaxy that would stop at nothing to see Zara's people remain in their weakened state. The artifact that they sought was of immense importance, not just to Zara and her people, but to several galactic powers that would do anything to claim it for themselves. The bond between Ethan and Zara wasn't just a matter of law anymore, it was a matter of survival. It was late one night, after a particularly tense meeting with the Zari diplomats, that the true cost of this bond became apparent. Ethan had been walking the halls of the embassy, trying to clear his mind, when he was approached by a shadowy figure. At first, he thought it was just a passerby, another diplomat or official. But as the figure stepped closer, he realized it was one of the Corrin, a species known for their ruthlessness and deadly intelligence. "You're with her," the Corrin said, his voice a low, menacing whisper. "The bond is real, then? She's claimed you." Ethan tensed, his instincts screaming to run, but his feet were frozen to the floor. "What do you want?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The Corrin smiled, a cold, calculating grin. What we want is simple. The artifact. And you. You will come with us, or we will take her from you. There's no way out of this, human. We will see your bond undone, and you will never be the same. Ethan felt the air grow heavy, his heart pounding in his chest. The consequences of his actions, of his words, were starting to materialize in ways he couldn't have foreseen. His life, once so simple and predictable, was now inextricably linked to Zara's, and in the galaxy's dangerous political game, that made him a target. We will see you again, Ethan, the Corrin said as he stepped back into the shadows, his voice lingering in the air like a dark omen. And when we do, you'll understand that there is no such thing as escape. Ethan stood there, shaken and uncertain. He was caught in the crossfire of a galactic war, and the price of his loyalty, his bond with Zara, was one he hadn't yet begun to understand. But there was no turning back now. The bond had been forged. The law was in motion. And the galaxy, with all its dangers and conflicts, would soon feel the consequences of that simple, fateful compliment. The days that followed the encounter with the Corrin were clouded with uncertainty. Ethan's nights were restless, haunted by the chilling warning that had been spoken to him. There was no turning back from the bond now. The law had been invoked, and as much as he tried to distance himself from it, every moment of his existence now seemed tied to Zara, the alien warrior whose power and strength both terrified and fascinated him. But it wasn't just Zara's presence that weighed heavily on him. The Corrin, a ruthless faction known throughout the galaxy for their merciless tactics, had made it clear that they would stop at nothing to break the bond between Zara and him, to claim the artifact, and to put an end to the power struggle that raged in the galaxy. Ethan tried to push forward with the summit and the negotiations, but it felt like everything was happening so quickly. Each day, he found himself drawn deeper into a web of politics and betrayal, where nothing was as it seemed, and no one could be trusted. Zara had warned him that they were not only fighting for the artifact, but also for their lives. The Corrin were not the only threat, they were just the first of many. He spent hours with her, learning about her people, about the history of the Zari, and about the sacrifices she had made to protect her people and their legacy. Yet, despite everything she told him, he still felt like a stranger in her world. He was not a warrior. He was just a man who had gotten caught in something far larger than himself. One night, after a particularly heated discussion with a delegation from another star system, Zara pulled him aside. Her expression was serious, and for the first time since their bond had been established, she allowed herself a moment of vulnerability. "We need to leave Sarvax for," she said quietly, her voice filled with urgency. "The Corrin will not stop until they have what they want. They will take the artifact and destroy anyone who stands in their way." Ethan's stomach dropped. He had known they were in danger, but hearing it from her, seeing the fear in her eyes, fear that had been hidden behind her otherwise unshakable demeanor, hit him like a tidal wave. "We're not prepared," Ethan said, his voice strained. "I'm not a warrior. I don't know how to fight them." Zara's eyes softened, but there was still that cold determination in her gaze. "You are more than just a mechanic, Ethan. You are part of this now, part of the bond. And together, we will face whatever comes. There is no turning back." He looked at her then, and for the first time, he understood the weight of the decision he had made. This wasn't just about surviving. It was about fighting for something larger than themselves, about protecting the fragile bond they had formed in the chaos of the galaxy's ever-shifting power dynamics. He nodded, though doubt still clung to his every thought. But there was no escaping it now. Zara turned toward the door, her movements deliberate, her resolve unshaken. "We will leave tonight. We have to act before they make their move." Ethan followed her, feeling like he was walking toward the unknown, a path that had no clear end. He wasn't ready for this, but neither of them had the luxury of waiting any longer. Together, they would fight whether he was ready or not. Chapter 4. The Battle for the Future. The escape from Sarvax 4 was swift, but not without complications. Zara had prepared for every possibility, yet even she could not foresee the full force of the Corrin's assault. As they boarded their ship and moved toward the uncharted region where the artifact was hidden, the Corrin launched a full-scale attack. Their fleet, dark and menacing, descended upon the planet, determined to crush any resistance. Ethan had never been in the midst of an all-out battle, but standing at the helm of the ship beside Zara, he could feel the pulse of it in his veins. The ship's hull shuddered under the assault, but Zara moved with such confidence that Ethan found himself following her lead instinctively. She was a warrior, and her strength was undeniable. The chaos of battle, the flashing lights of weapons fire, the alarms blaring through the ship, it all felt like something out of a nightmare. Yet in the midst of it, Ethan stood resolute. He wasn't just a translator anymore. He was a part of this fight, and the bond between him and Zara was all that mattered. "We're almost there," Zara called over the roar of the battle, her voice unwavering. "We have to reach the artifact before they do." Ethan nodded, his heart pounding in his chest as the ship rocked violently. He didn't have a weapon. He wasn't trained to fight. But when Zara had needed him most, when the ship was on the line and everything seemed to be falling apart, he had stepped up, driven by a force stronger than fear, the strength of the bond they shared. He was here because of the ancient law that had bound them together. He would not back down. As they entered the coordinates for the artifact's location, the ship plummeted through a fiery descent into the depths of a forgotten world. The planet's surface was jagged, cracked with ancient chasms and erupting volcanoes. The artifact was hidden deep within the heart of this desolate land, guarded by ancient forces that even the Zari had failed to conquer. But it wasn't the artifact they feared now, it was the Koran. They had arrived too late. Zara stood at the edge of the crater where the artifact was said to be buried, her body poised, her expression determined. "This is it, Ethan," she said, her voice steady as ever. "Once we retrieve the artifact, the war between us and the Koran ends. We'll change the course of the galaxy." Ethan felt the weight of those words as he stood beside her. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about shaping the future of countless civilizations. Together, they had become more than just allies. They were the last hope for peace in a galaxy on the brink of war. But as they moved deeper into the crater, they found themselves facing not just Koran soldiers, but an ancient force that had been dormant for centuries, the guardians of the artifact. These beings, ancient and powerful, rose from the earth itself, their forms shifting between light and shadow. They moved with an intelligence that far surpassed anything Ethan had ever encountered. "Step back," Zara commanded, drawing her weapon and standing protectively in front of Ethan. Her body was a shield, her focus razor-sharp. "We fight together now." The battle was unlike anything Ethan had ever witnessed. It was a clash of ancient power and modern technology, light against darkness, survival against annihilation. In the midst of it all, Ethan stood by Zara's side, not as a translator, not as a bystander, but as her partner. He fought, not with weapons, but with the strength of their bond, with the knowledge that they were in this together. And in the end, it was their unity that won the day. With the final strike, the Guardians fell, the Koran were defeated, and the artifact was theirs. But the cost was high. The journey had changed them both, and as the battle faded into memory, Ethan realized that the person standing beside him wasn't just the warrior he had admired from afar. She was more than that. She was his equal, his partner, and the one who would stand with him as they rebuilt the galaxy. The bond that had once seemed like a curse had, in the end, become the very thing that saved them. They had faced the unimaginable together. And now, as they looked toward the horizon, the future stretched out before them, uncertain, yes, but theirs to shape. The ancient law had brought them together, and together, they would change the galaxy.